Hey nerds, in this video we review and do a spoiler breakdown and discussion of The Rings of Power, episode 6 called Udun, directed by Charlotte Brändström and written by Nicholas Adams, Justin Doble, D. Payne, and Patrick McKay, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Colin.
Hi, and I'm Priya.
So, we are now more than halfway through Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and our spoiler-free summary logline is Adar and his army, march on Ostirith. So very short, spoiler-free summary this week, much shorter than others. So Priya, what do you think of this week's episode of episode 6 entitled Udun?
So I think the pace definitely picked up. I know we've talked about in the past how the show has had, some issues in pacing and differential pacing, but I think it definitely picked up. It was probably one of the most focused episodes of the season so far, and I think it's because they really focused on two of the many storylines, which helped it. There is a lot of action, and hopefully that's not spoiling it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, because I know, Colin, that was something that you felt it was missing. So there was a lot of action. I think I had mentioned this before. Like, we know the story. It's like, this slow burn to this inevitable tragedy, right? But I do think that pace really picked up in this week's episode, and they pulled off some of the action in kind of the Lord of the Rings expectation pretty well. So I enjoyed it. I think it was good, and it definitely I love the way it ended. So we can talk about that when we get into spoilers.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Priya, is that yes, I've been really highly critical of the first 5 episodes being very slow and not much action going on. And we kind of saw from last week that there was going to be some buildup because they were setting sail to Middle Earth, and we knew that something's going to happen. It was all set up that way, and it did not disappoint. I think that it was definitely, you definitely saw the level of the trilogy that was that in snippets here and there, but I think it still held its own. I think that even I end up going on YouTube to kind of watch old clips of the original trilogy, and it just those goosebumps and all the thrills of all the battles and all the drama that's involved. I think that it's definitely here in this episode a lot more than, say, the first 5. The first 5, not much drama. I mean, there's drama, yes, but it wasn't very compelling drama. There might be some tensions between, say, for example, Elrond and Durin, but not so much. And then the Harfoots, yeah, there's some drama there about them being left behind, but it's like not very compelling. But for this one, I really felt that there was a lot of compellingness to it. There's a lot of twists and turns that we can get into in the spoiler breakdown. But yeah, I really did like this episode. It's probably my favorite of all the ones so far. So hopefully it just kind of like builds up even more. As I think there's like 10 episodes, so we're getting toward the end. So it's hopefully going to get really good toward the end.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts before we get into the spoiler breakdown?
No, let's get into the spoilers. It'll be fun.
Okay. So if you enjoy our conversation here, please like and subscribe to our channel, and it will really help out in the algorithm and all such things like that. We really appreciate all of that you do, and so we can make more content like this. So we've been reviewing a lot of content this past few weeks. So in order to kind of show more, please like and subscribe. So spoilers ahead. Okay. So Priya, do you want to go chronological order of the episode, or do you want to kind of jump around? Because there is a lot of things to kind of that we can kind of jump around.
Yeah,
and this time actually we don't even have images this week, so we're just going to do a brief discussion. No images this week though.
Yeah, I mean, kind of too late. We can jump around. I mean, like we were saying, I think there's a lot of action. There's kind of like 3 big, I think, chunks of action sequences. And like we were saying, like it felt more focused because almost all of the episode is in the Southlands. and
Right.
you just have, Númenóreans and Galadriel making their way over to Middle Earth. But most of it is just really around the men of the Southlands and Adar and the orcs. And it actually made for, like you said, a really kind of compelling storyline, because it's like, yes, the main theme episode after episode is like good versus evil and good people uniting and all of that. But I felt like this was a true kind of, fantasy battle, Lord of the Rings coming head to head. So I
Right.
really like how they executed some of that. Definitely got major Helm's Deep vibes. I think that's probably what they were going for.
Yes.
I don't know if you felt the same, but even like
Yeah.
the, like the what Browen says to Theo about something about like the shadow and the light, and it's slow motion, and it's like the women and children. I was like, okay, Helm's Deep called. They won all their shots back. They're obviously going for that emotion.
Yeah, definitely. I think that quote by Bronwyn actually reminded me a lot of Sam's quote in Two Towers. So that was like the Sam quote, that the one that's like very inspirational about like shadows of passing. It's always in passing, and it's like, there's always good in the world and stuff like that. So it got to that level, but not. I mean, it got close to that level, but that's still probably one of the best ever lines. That is so inspirational and so like dramatic in tone and stuff like that. So that's kind of like where I just felt as though a lot of the show was missing, missing that type of epicness. And I think that they got close in some aspects, but in the other aspects, it's like, yeah, you're still not there yet. And hopefully, kind of like the last few episodes get to that level. And then, I'm hoping that's the case. So, speaking about the action sequences, I think that we can start with with the Helm's Deep part, where they're kind of like fortified in the tavern, kind of a smaller version of Helm's Deep, and Arondir has his Legolas moment, which was really really cool. I just think that he just yeah hopefully he becomes a star because of this show, but he's just so like heroic, and he's almost like the only guy that's like somewhat competent in terms of battle, whereas the other people are kind of, again, farmers, and they're not really fighters, they're not really soldiers. So him and also Bronwyn kind of like leading the charge there was really cool. And just like Aaron Deere just like having his moment there, just trying to bring down a lot of the orcs was really cool. Like just that level of sophistication we haven't seen yet. So that was definitely really thrilling for me overall in terms of that action. What do you think of that one, about that action sequence for you?
I thought it was cool. I mean, he has some. I mean, he also has that moment where very gruesome with the knife in the orc's eye, and he like gets
yes,
a bunch of blood in his mouth. So I think he gets a lot of action sequences focused around him, and Bronwyn does actually come and save him at the end. But I think they focus a lot of very interesting action sequences around him. Also, at the very beginning with Ostirith, when he pretty single-handedly brings down that booby-trapped tower onto Adar and his orc. So I think he gets a lot of focus of the action before the Númenóreans come in. I think a lot of it is set around him. I was also kind of surprised how much they've completely grown Bronwyn's character. If you remember when we first meet her, she's like this quiet healer and kind of unsure, and now she's like, the lead person to bring these, to lead the battle cry essentially. So I thought that was quite the character development for her.
Yeah.
I also think it's much more darker and gruesome than the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings, in the sense that, like the blood going into his mouth, and like the whole thing with Bronwyn and showing her wound, and in that whole sequence in the tavern. I do think they're going, and even like showing some of the villagers like killing each other, and like in the tavern when they're like, stabbing the swords. It definitely goes a much darker level than the originals.
Oh yeah, you're right on that. I mean they were definitely like women being stabbed, by spears and stuff like that. You saw a couple of shots like that. So I was like, wow, they actually showed women being stabbed.
Yeah.
Like usually you don't see that. You don't see like women being stabbed, like innocent women being stabbed, like innocent women villagers being stabbed. So seeing that, also the gruesomeness of the blood, yeah,
Mm.
that was a lot of blood, especially when Brownwing got shot in the shoulder, and then they saw the cauterization of her. Well, I was like, wow, that's like next level epicness. I was just really, yeah, that was pretty hardcore stuff. I'm like, wow, they really showed all that, but then like it showed it, like you said, Priya, it's like how she's kind of grown from this healer. Like, yes, you could always see that there was a lot of strength in her, but then she grown into this like almost awesome female figure. It's like she's probably becoming one of my favorites because of that. It's like, wow, that's awesome
Yeah.
type of type of uh type of empowerment that's there, and then her saving like Arondir is like really cool. And they also have a very very touching moment as well, right before battle. So finally that happened. Like we all knew that they have something for each other, but they finally showed that, and that was really touching as well.
I'm actually surprised that they did that in season one. I thought we would be dragging with this will they won't they for a few seasons. So,
No, they shouldn't do that. No, don't do that. And then when she was shot in the air, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, but they kissed. They were in love. Are you gonna kill her already? It's like, no, don't do that to me,
I know.
please.
When Halbrand and Galadriel had their moment, I was like, oh man, are they gonna do another like elf and human weird love story thing?
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
You know?
That was very interesting too, with the eyes. And oh, I haven't felt as alive as I have when following you in battle. It's like, oh, okay, we kind of love tension, a lot of love tension there, and you kind of saw that already. They kind of built that up already in some ways, but she's kind of playing coy to it. But now she's like, oh, really? You feel that way?
Yeah, but I think it's also the audience putting the romantic love twist on it, right? Because Tolkien
Sure.
stories are fundamentally about love and fellowship between beings. I mean,
Yes.
even the fellowship, like Sam loved Frodo, but it wasn't romantic love. So maybe
Right.
we're supposed to have the similar feeling here of Galadriel and Halbrand, but we're projecting the romantic feelings
True. True.
there,
Very true.
maybe. I don't know, but I liked I mean, it's obviously when the Númenóreans come again, it's very Helm's Deep, when Gandalf shows up.
Hmm.
And so I think
Right.
it obviously has a lot of similar things. And then when she's chasing Adar through the forest, it was very much like when Arwen was, taking Frodo away from the ring raid. So definitely lots and lots of callbacks to the action sequences. I mean, we know that it's not at the level that Peter Jackson
Mm.
did, but they're obviously trying, and you can see it's in the same breath. And I guess they're trying to take it further with the level of gruesomeness that they're showing us.
Yeah.
So maybe there's that. But I also like kind of some of the stuff between the non-action sequences. I also thought were very um, nice and
Mhm.
revealing. Like even the conversation between Elendil and Isildur with the horse.
Yes.
That was like
Yes.
right before everything blew up, which I thought was actually very sweet. So there were some nice moments there.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that the conversations, I think are much more compelling because of the fact that they're in battle, and they're kind of like tensions have risen. Whereas I think that in the first few episodes, you didn't see. I mean, yes, there was tension, but it's not compelling tension because they're not in danger. Whereas here, they're in danger, and it's like you don't know if Elendil is gonna die. And you saw that toward the end. You saw he's trying to save the queen, and it's like you don't know whether or not he's gonna die. You don't know, and and it's set up to be that Elendil in that moment, you're like, what's going to happen to him?
Yeah.
Why is he saying that to him at that moment in time? And then like talking about his mother, like, oh, I learned this from your mother, and your mother's already dead. So it's like, they're kind of setting that up in some ways, but at the same time, I'm just like you feel that because of there's that type of tension, there's drama there, and
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that type of thing. Also, what you mentioned about the chase, through the forest. Yeah, Galadriel had some really nice moves with the horse,
Mm-hmm.
like going down and like, oh, that was really cool.
Speaking of Legolas again.
Yeah, yeah, that was really well done overall. I really enjoyed that, and yes, I think that because there was more action, I was just really thrilled overall of the episode, because again, you do call back to Lord of the Rings being epic action packed sequences, the battle sequences, and we see that now, and on top of the dramas and all the dialogue on top of it, the compelling dialogue. So it's good that they kind of put that in there as like the thing. Action is the thing, which then leads to better conversations. Whereas, like I said in the first 4 episodes, you didn't see that at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's why the drama is kind of built up. And we saw that when she did end up capturing Adar, and so what happens is Halbrand almost tried to kill him in the forest, and then we see the flip side of it happening in the barn where Galadriel tried to kill him, because he was basically egging her on, like saying, "You're the one who's going to be more evil than me. What are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think of that interaction there between when he was captured? It's kind of like the Hannibal Lecter type of thing going there.
I mean, I hate to say he kind of had a point, because Galadriel definitely went dark. I mean, she pretty much was like, "I'm gonna kill your kids and you're gonna watch, and then I'm gonna kill you right after." I was like, "Whoa, Galadriel!" So I think he kind of had an interesting point, but I liked that conversation a lot. And the thing is, you were saying earlier with like the tension and the stakes. I mean, a lot of this episode are focused on new characters that are not part of the Tolkien lore, right? Adar, Arondir, Bronwyn. I mean, they do not exist in Tolkien's books, and
Right.
so they are a lot of the focus of this episode is really around them. So it kind of gives the show makers also some, I guess, freedom to kind of do what they will. And the whole Adar thing, I think, is so fascinating because, and with Halbrand, because they are the top two right now of like, is he or isn't he Sauron? And
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting when Halbrand was like, "Do you know me?" And Adar's like, "No." And he could be saying, "Do you recognize me as Sauron? Because you tried to kill me." Because Adar actually says, "I actually kill Sauron because of everything that he was doing to my children." And then later, Adar even asks Halbrand, like, "Actually, who are you?" So I think it's the show continues to tease. We know that something's up with Halbrand. He's not. He's probably not who he says he is. Even though we want him to be Aragorn, he's probably,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of I like that they continue to unwrap that whole thing a lot more. I think the other moment I liked a lot was between Isildur and Galadriel in the boat. It was a very
Mm-hmm.
quiet
Yes.
scene, but now like all the characters are kind of converging because we've had so many characters and so many storylines. And I like we
Yeah.
we're saying, I think this episode kind of focused it a bit more, and I really like that interaction. What did you think? I have a few things that I can bring in from like the original Tolkien on just stuff Isildur said, but what did you think of that?
Yeah, I just found it very refreshing because you see kind of you see based on the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, where Galadriel is telling the backstory of how Isildur lived, and then now you're kind of seeing it backwards, where Isildur is the young, a younger one, much more kind of idealistic or whatever, not as adult, and Galadriel being much more of a soldier, much more
Mhm.
forceful, less of a pacifist than she was when she was in the trilogy. So I just find it very fascinating that they kind of, this is kind of like in some ways the first time they kind of interacted with each other.
Yeah.
And then seeing that, and then with the dichotomy of her giving the backstory of how Isildur fell to the ring, the ring's power and stuff like that. So that's really fascinating to me in a lot of ways, and how Galad, like I said in earlier reviews, is how Galadriel is. Uh, she is definitely much more forceful and much more youthful, and has much more of an idealism, gearing towards darkness in some ways.
Oh.
Like there's a darkness inside of her. Like I think there's one article I saw online. It's like she's a psychopath. It's like but she wasn't that way when she was in the trilogy. She was very, I mean, except for that moment where Frodo offered her the ring, then you kind of saw that darkness and stuff like that. But other than that, she's pretty kind of removed. Like she's above it all now. Like I don't really care what you guys do. It's all on you, not on me anymore. Like it's just so, it's a very interesting evolution from that, because we're just trying to fill in those gaps. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think it's interesting that you're kind of tying it almost backwards, right, to what happened thousands of years later when Isildur actually has the ring. But I like the conversation because I think they bonded on this whole idea of the real Numenor. And because Isildur from the books, he is actually one of like the faithful Numenorians, right? And that means like because the island does get corrupted by Sauron. We've all talked about, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it faces an Atlantean fate and it actually goes under. But but he's one of the original faithfuls, him and Elendil, that they're the ones who kind of keep that nobility and the values of Numenor, and they go to Middle Earth, right? And I think Colin, you had mentioned as well, where Isildur actually takes some of the seeds from the white tree, and he's the one who brings it to Gondor. That's what we see is the same tree. So I think it's interesting how that value is very clear, because I think we're going to see that in the series, right? We know it's 5 seasons. We're probably going to see the sinking of Numenor, the Numenorians kind of establishing these kingdoms, Gondor, and will probably be seen at some point being established. So I think it's that value system of Isildur and how he holds on to this faithful Numenor and real Numenor, and how Galadriel values that too. I think it's definitely going to be seen again. So we'll kind of see, and I think Isildur's mother also, that's mentioned a couple of times. So I'm curious if they're going to tease that out maybe in future episodes, or maybe in next season. Maybe it's a side story. I don't know, but they're obviously building a mystery around her. So we might actually get something from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it could be possible that she's an elf too. There's been a lot of like interspecies interactions with the elves and with Numenorians. We saw with Aragorn and Arwen, so it could happen.
Yeah,
it could happen. And then also you mentioned about Halbrand and Galadriel having a moment as well. So Halbrand has been kind of deemed the return of the king in a lot of ways, and so it might be a misdirect, like you said. It might be a misdirect in terms of we want him to be Aragorn, but probably he may not be. He may not be that way. Although Nathan did speculate that he could be Witch King of Angmar.
Yeah.
So could be, but I have a feeling that it might be Theo. That could turn, because he's had this darkness in him, and I think at the end when Arondir gave him what he thought was the Morgoth sword, and it wasn't, and so he was like, what happened there? It's like, throw it into the ocean. It's like, okay, but he did it. But I don't. Did you make out as to like how that happened? Like, did he just like gave it somewhere or something? Because I kind of lost track about what happened to.
It's funny you say that, because the whole time I was like, open the package. Yeah. I'm sure it's not the hilt. Because you kind of see him sketchily getting away right when the Numenorians get there, and I was like, no, it's just too convenient. It's too convenient that they got the hilt, and it's nobody's paying attention to actually opening the damn thing. the whole time I was like, can somebody just open it to see if it's actually the hilt? But I will say, obviously, what transpires in the end, because it's not the hilt, is pretty phenomenal. Because I feel like the show really kind of hit the viewers in the gut with that shift in the narrative, because the whole time, like, we watch Lord of the Rings, we know it's good versus evil, most time good wins, even though, even when all hope is lost, yada yada yada, which is kind of what happened here. Like the Southland menfolk were kind of up against the wall in the tavern, and then the Númenóreans show up and save the day. And if the episode ended there, that's like classic Lord of the Rings fantasy trope, right? But then it's like, oh no, here we go. Now we're actually going to see pretty much the birth of Mount Doom.
Right.
And it ended in like this completely topsy-turvy kind of way, which I loved. I thought that was amazing how they kind of just completely turned the story on its head.
So basically what happened was that Waldreg was the guy who took it, and then it got forged back the way it was, and then he opened the key to basically let all the water go through, and basically, again, like you said, it became the birth of Mountain Doom. So that was really, really fascinating. And that ending shot with Galadriel.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
It's very cool. I mean, I guess the thing is, like, obviously, depending how close they stay with the books. I mean, the movies too. We know Galadriel's gonna survive. Elendil and Isildur obviously are going to survive up to a certain point, because we see their death in the movies. So from that perspective, I guess the characters that we know and they're a part of Tolkien lore, we haven't seen them like this, like you said, right? So we have never seen Galadriel, this form of Galadriel. So her just standing there in disbelief, I thought that was a pretty amazing shot, even though we know what her fate is at the end of the day. But I think, like, Theo's missing, obviously Adar gets away, and those are new characters that, I think we're more curious about what's going to happen now, because the stakes have really been raised after this episode. Because you're pretty much seeing the birth of Mordor, right? Like, all those tunnels that the orcs were building or burrowing, I guess, pretty much allowed that water to go and erupt the lava and create Mount Doom, and now create Mordor, which I think it's stark, because the whole episode that's set in the Southlands, like, it's also green and bright, that we knew that that's the fate of the Southlands, is to become Mordor, but it's crazy to kind of just see how it transforms, and I think this episode set that up really brilliantly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's there's this ominous end to it, and we know that there's going to be some sort of ominous end to this. Even with the flashbacks of, I always go back to the flashbacks where the one with Elrond saying that I was there 3,000 years ago when Isildur, we were fighting with Isildur, and he killed Sauron, and then he said toss it in the fire, and he didn't do it. Yeah. So it's like we all know that was going to happen. So getting to that point is just who knows if we're going to skip thousands and thousands of years, because again, he said that was 3,000 years ago when that happened, and we know that Elrond is not even at that age yet, where he's like, where they're like aligning, they're in alignment with men and Isildur is older, so we haven't gotten to that point.
Totally.
Isildur is young. So
I love that scene from the originals, by the way, and like every time they say Isildur, I always think of Elrond's voice being like, Isildur, throw it into the fire, every time. I just can't help it, because I love the way Hugo Weaving kind of screams Isildur. But I think it's I feel like they've ended the show really in an interesting way, and we didn't get the Harfoots at all,
Nope.
this episode, and we also didn't get anything of the elves or the dwarves in terms of Elrond and Disa and Durin. So I think we'll probably get more of that next week. Yep. I'm really curious how long they're gonna keep this whole who is the stranger storyline going with the Harfoots. I feel like they need to. I mean, it's a mystery, sure, but it's also the most intriguing part of that storyline. So I
Yeah.
think they kind of have to unravel that a little bit faster. So hopefully some of, how they really upped the pace and the stakes in this episode kind of carries over to the remaining 4 episodes of the season.
Right. Right. I agree. I think that they really do need out the stakes. I think probably I would predict that probably by the end of season 1 you probably will know who he is. So
Yeah.
either Saruman or as Gandalf, uh,
Or one of the wizards,
or
because
one of the wizards
there were
exactly.
five. There were five in Middle Earth, so probably one of the five, whichever one it ends up being. I also really like the Adar character that they kind of really leaned into the ancient orc.
Right.
Like one of the original elves, pretty much that was corrupted by Morgoth. I think that was because it's a new character that you kind of have to make him a really compelling villain. I think
Hmm.
between that and the fact that he almost gives a not humanity is not the right word, but when he's explaining to Galadriel that scene where he's saying they have the right to breathe as
Hmm.
much as any other creature, because like Tolkien never really gave this like, you know, morality or moral compass to the orcs at all. Whereas
Mm.
the show through Adar is actually saying they also deserve a home, you know? And I think it's definitely because they're always like orcs bad, you know,
Yes.
orcs evil.
Yes.
And here, Adar actually says they also have a right to have a home, you know. And I think between that and the whole thing, like he quote unquote kills Sauron because of the harm he was inflicting on his children, the orcs,
Mm.
and being one of the original kind of ancient creatures that Morgoth created, I think it's a really interesting dimension for a new character that the show's putting.
Yeah, I think I like your analysis there, Bria. I think that that's definitely something that they can kind of build upon and try to even give some more complexity to the good versus evil vibe,
Yeah,
because they're definitely in that conversation. You definitely saw the grays between both characters, so
exactly.
that was really well done in a lot of ways. So leaning into that would be really great in terms of this property, because like you said, we've seen kind of like it's pretty clear cut, and a lot of people like the clear cutness of it. But at the same time, adding that level of complexity then gives you more drama and more storylines to kind of explore a character. Not to the level of say of Darth Vader, where it could go either way, but to the level of, okay, I kind of see your point, but you're still evil in a lot of ways. Kind
Mhm.
of like more of the Marvel Killmonger Black Panther thing. So if it was more like that, it might be again a good kind of turn in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, and we saw that he escaped at the end, right? Because
Right.
he obviously like broke away from the chains or the rope. I don't remember, probably rope. So we're obviously going to see more of him. And the whole tension between him and Sauron will obviously exist because apparently he tried to kill him. So yeah, I think it's setting up for a really interesting storyline for the rest of the season. So looking forward to kind of seeing where that goes. And again, so Udun, I was looking this up earlier, means hell, which I
Yes.
is kind of where it ends.
Yeah. Pretty much, they're in hell. I mean, yeah, with Mount Doom basically consuming all of them. And who knows? Like you said, who knows is going to survive? Now we know Galadriel is going to survive. We know Isildur is going to survive. Elendil might probably survive as well.
You
But
will.
we don't know about the Queen. We don't know whether or not what happens to the Queen. She is there, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, any other thoughts about this episode 6? So I think that there was some stuff on episode 7, like a preview at the
Yeah.
very end that they tagged at the end. So we are going to see, like you said, the Harfoots and the Stranger again, and we're going to see the Dwarves and Elrond again. So yeah, we'll see what they were doing while this was happening.
I miss the bromance between Elrond and Durin a little bit.
Durin.
Feel like they really add that dimension to the show. So looking forward to having a little bit of that next week.
Well, that is what we think about episode 6, Rings of Power. So we'd like to hear from what you think. Comment down below, like and subscribe if you like more content like this, and we will see you next time.